A metric prefix or Si prefix is a unit prefix that precedes a basic unit of measure to indicate a decadic multiple or fraction of the unit. Each prefix is a unique symbol that is prepended to the unit symbol. The prefix kilo, for example, may be added to gram to indicate multiplication by 1000. 1 kilogram is equal to 1000 grams. The prefix centi, likewise, may be added to metre to indicate division by 100. 1 centimetre is equal to 1/100th of a metre. Decimal multiplicative prefixes have been a feature of all forms of the metric system, with many dating back to the system's introduction in the 1790s. Metric prefixes have even been prepended to non-metric units. Today the prefixes are standardized for use in the International System of Units by the International Bureau of Weights and Measures in resolutions dating from 1960 to 1991. Since 2009, they form part of the International System of Quantities. List of Si prefixes. There are 20 prefixes specified by the BIPM as part of the Si. Each prefix name has an associated symbol which can be used in combination with the symbols for units of measure. Thus, the kilo symbol, K, can be used to produce km, kg, and kilowatt. Prefixes may not be used in combination. This also applies to mass, for which the SI base unit already contains a prefix. So milligram is used instead of microkilogram, for example. There are multiple approaches to doing multiplication and division with prefixed values. In one, prefixed values cannot be multiplied or divided together, and they have to be converted into non-prefixed standard form for such calculations, hence 5 megavolt, 5 megampere per mil, 25 megawatt. In this model, the correct calculation is 5 megavolt, 5 megampere equals 5, 10^3 VA, 5, 10^3 A equals 25 times 10^6 W equals 25 AA microwatt equals 0.025 megawatt. Another approach is to treat prefixes as representative of their underlying values, and manipulate them algebraically. 5 megavolt, 5 megampere equals 25 megawatt is still incorrect, since one of the M prefixes has been erroneously dropped rather than being squared. The correct calculation is 5 megavolt, 5 megampere equals 25 M2W equals 0.025 megawatt or 25 AA microwatt. Algebraic prefix manipulation may introduce ambiguity if the symbols for prefixes aren't kept distinct from those for units. Prefixes corresponding to an exponent that is divisible by 3 are often recommended. Hence 100 AM rather than 1 HM, or 10 ADAM. The non-3 prefixes are however more commonly used for everyday purposes than in science. When units occur in exponentiation, for example, in square and cubic forms, the size prefix is considered part of the unit, and thus included in the exponentiation. 1 kilometer 2 means 1 square kilometer, or the area of a square of 1000 AM by 1000 AM and not 1000 square meters. 2 millimeters 3 means 2 cubic megameters, or the volume of 2 cubes of 1 million M by 1 million M by 1 million M, or 2A, 1018 AM3, and not 2 million cubic meters. Examples: 5 cm equals 5A, 10 AM equals 5A, 0.01 meters equals 0.05 M, 9 km2 equals 9 km, 2 equals 9A, K2M2 equals 9 103, 2A, M2 equals 9A, 10.6 AM2 equals 9A, 1 million M2 equals 9 million M2, 3 MW equals 3A, 10.6 W equals 3A, 1 million watts equals 3000000 W. Application to units of measurement. The use of prefixes can be traced back to the introduction of the metric system in the 1790s, long before the 1960 introduction of the SI. The prefixes, including those introduced after 1960, are used with any metric unit, whether officially included in the SI or not. Metric prefixes may also be used with non-metric units. The choice of prefixes with a given unit is usually dictated by convenience of use. Unit prefixes for amounts that are much larger or smaller than those actually encountered are seldom used, though they remain valid combinations. In most contexts only a few most common combinations are established as standard. Mass, the kilogram, hectogram, gram, milligram, microgram, and smaller are common. However, megagram are rarely used. Tons or scientific notation are used instead. Megagram is occasionally used to disambiguate the metric ton from the various non-metric tons. An exception is pollution emission rates, which are typically on the order of Tg. Sometimes only one element is denoted for an emission, such as Tg carat per year or Tg Newton per year, so that intercomparisons of different compounds are easier. Volume, the liter, deciliter, centiliter, milliliter, microliter, and smaller are common. Larger volumes are sometimes denoted in hectoliters. Otherwise in cubic meters or cubic kilometers. In Australia, large quantities of water are measured in kiloliters, megaliters and gigaliters. Length, the kilometer, metre, decimetre, centimetre, millimetre, and smaller are common. The micrometer is often referred to by the non-SI term micron. In some fields such as chemistry, the angstrom historically competed with the nanometer. The femtometer, used mainly in particle physics, is usually called a Fermi. For large scales, megameter, gigameter, and larger are rarely used. Often used are astronomical units, light years, and pascs. The astronomical unit is mentioned in the SI standards as an accepted non-SI unit. Time and angles, the second, millisecond, microsecond, and shorter are common. The kilosecond and megasecond also have some use, though for these and longer times one usually uses either scientific notation or minutes, hours, and so on. Official policies about the use of these prefixes vary slightly between the Bureau International des Poids et Mesures and the American National Institute of Standards and Technology. And some of the policies of both bodies are at variance with everyday practice. For instance, the NIST advises that to avoid confusion, prefix symbols are not used with the time-related unit symbols min, h, d. Nor with the angle-related symbols a degree, a euro squared, and a euro cubed. The BIPM unregistered trademark S position on the use of SI prefixes with units of time larger than the second is the same as that of the NIST, but their position with regard to angles differs. They state however astronomers use milliarcsecond, which they denote mas, and micrasecond, a micron as, which they use as units for measuring very small angles. Temperature, official policy also varies from common practice for the degree Celsius. NIST states, prefix symbols may be used with the unit symbol a degree Celsius and prefixes may be used with the unit name degree Celsius. For example, 12 degree Celsius is acceptable. In practice, it is more common for prefixes to be used with the Kelvin when it is desirable to denote extremely large or small absolute temperatures or temperature differences. Thus, temperatures of star interiors may be given in units of Mk, and molecular cooling may be described in Mk. Energy, there exist a number of definitions for the non-SI unit, the calorie. There are gram calories and kilogram calories. 1 kilogram calorie, which equals 1000 gram calories, often appears capitalized and without a prefix when referring to dietary calories in food. It is common to apply metric prefixes to the gram calorie but not to the kilogram calorie, thus, for example, 1 kilocalorie equals 1000 a cal equals 1 a cal. Non-metric units, metric prefixes rarely appear with imperial or US units except in some special cases. They are also used with other specialized units used in particular fields. They are also occasionally used with currency units, mainly by people who are familiar with the prefixes from scientific usage. Presentation, pronunciation. The prefix giga is pronounced in two acceptable ways, and. According to the American writer Kevin Self, in the 1920s a German committee member of the International Electrotechnical Commission proposed giga-amp as a prefix for 109, drawing on a verse by the humorous poet Christian Morgenstern that appeared in the third edition of Galgenlieder. This suggests a hard German G was originally intended as the pronunciation. Self was unable to ascertain when the pronunciation was accepted, but as of 1995 current practice had returned to. When an Si prefix is affixed to a root word, the prefix carries the stress, while the root drops its stress but retains a full vowel in the syllable that is stressed when the root word stands alone. For example, gigabyte is, with stress on the first syllable. However, words in common use outside the scientific community may follow idiosyncratic stress rules. Kilometer is commonly pronounced, with reduced vowels on both syllables of meter. Typesetting. The LaTeX typesetting system features an Si Unite package, in which the units of measurement are spelled out, for example, \Si3\Tira\Hertz formats as 3THZ. Disallowed and obsolete prefixes. Former metric prefixes. Some of the prefixes formerly used in the metric system have fallen into disuse and were not adopted into the SI. The prefix myria originated from the Greek I to the first, and the prefixes demi and double, denoting a factor of 1 or 2 and 2, respectively, were parts of the original metric system adopted by France in 1795. These were not retained when the Si prefixes were internationally adopted by the 11th CGPM conference in 1960. The halving and doubling prefixes were dropped because they were neither decimal nor symmetrical. Most were rarely used, although the myriameter is occasionally encountered in 19th-century train tariffs, or in some classifications of wavelengths as the adjective myriametric. In Sweden and Norway, the myriameter is still common in everyday use. In these countries this unit is called mil. Of units customarily used in trade in France, the myriagram was the metric replacement for an avoirdupois unit, the quartier. Isaac Asimov's novel Foundation and Empire mentions the myriaton. Double prefixes. Double prefixes have been used in the past, such as micromillimeters or millimicrons, micromicrofarads, hectokilometers and the derived adjective hectokilometric. These were disallowed with the introduction of the SI. Hella prefix proposal. In 2010, UC Davies student Austin Senk started a petition to designate Hella as the Si prefix for 1 octillion. The petition gathered over 60,000 supporters by circulating through Facebook and receiving a significant amount of media coverage. Although the Consultative Committee for Units considered the proposal, it was ultimately rejected. However, Hella has been adopted by certain websites, such as Google Calculator and Wolfram Alpha. Similar symbols and abbreviations. In written English, the symbol K is often used informally to mean a multiple of thousand in many contexts. For example, one may talk of a 40K salary, or call the year 2000 problem the Y2K problem. In these cases an uppercase K is often used. This informal postfix is read or spoken as thousand, or grand, or just K, but never kilo. The financial and general news media mostly use BB and TT as abbreviations for million, billion and trillion for large quantities, typically currency and population. For nearly a century, the electrical construction industry used the abbreviation MCM to designate 1,000 circular mills in specifying thicknesses of large electrical cables. Since the mid-1990s, KCMIL has been adopted as the official designation of 1,000 circular mills, but the designation MCM still remains in wide use. A similar system is used in natural gas sales in the United States, M for thousands and M for millions of British thermal units or therms, and in the oil industry, where MMBBL is the symbol for millions of barrels. The computer industry is possibly the only industry in which some Si prefixes have been given definitions inconsistent with the International System of Units. JEDEC has redefined the prefixes kilo, mega and giga amperes powers of 1024 instead of 1000, but not tera or any larger decimal prefix. With an aim of avoiding confusion, the International Electrotechnical Commission has defined a different set of binary names and symbols for the same power of 1024 units. See also. Notes. References. This article is based on material taken from the free online Dictionary of Computing prior to November 1, 2008 and incorporated under the relicensing terms of the GFDL, version 1.3 or later. External links. Bureau International des Poids et Mesures, Si Prefixes at BIPM, US NIST definitions of the SI units, the 20 SI prefixes, US NIST definitions of the SI units, the binary prefixes, International Standard ISO 2955, information processing, representation of SI and other units in systems with limited character sets, withdrawn.